Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to tonight's Truth Foragers here on the Baltic Star channel. We would like to thank the boys from the Baltic Star for once again allowing us to make use of their wonderful surroundings, their technology, and you, the audience. We'd like to thank our regular snufflers, our members, for joining us this evening. They know, of course, that we're going to look into some fascinating and incredible tales tonight from the research that the three of us, you may notice, the three of us have been doing over the last months. My name is Dickie Waghorn, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight with my regular friend and co host, Rick Bishop. Good evening, Rick. How are you?
Um, I'm well, thank you. I've been snuffling harder than usual this week. It does take it out of you a little bit, but
It is autumn.
it is. It's that time of year. As the nights grow darker, the talls grow, the tails grow taller, and frankly, it becomes harder to avoid the encroaching darkness, physical, metaphorical, and literal.
Uh, Rick, I hear that you've been hard at work on a new pamphlet that you were looking to release to the masses in early October. Could you give us a snippet of it, if possible?
Yes, of course. I felt that there was a need for a true introductory guide to a few things to watch out for when you first begin the challenge of foraging for truth. So I've constructed a set of 10 key rules that you need to follow in order to be a successful truth forager. Um, they can't always be literally followed to the letter, of course, because as we know, the world is stranger than any single set of rules can encompass. But I think they're a useful guide. Um, and and so, how about I just pick one of those to give you? Um, my rule number two, perhaps.
Oh, always. You always leave your best rule to rule number two, I've noticed over the last few years.
Yes. So my rule number two, for example. So this will give you a sense of the nature of the rules and how important they are to follow. Rule number two: always remember that they don't want you to learn these secrets, so they carefully hide them. If a phenomenon has hundreds of witnesses, television pictures, or plenty of physical evidence, then it's clearly not being hidden very well. It's far more likely that the authentic story was only witnessed by a single person late at night in a remote field.
I think it's a really good point to make that if a tale suddenly becomes such that they need many people to repeat it, it seems like they're trying too hard, that they're pushing a false narrative, Rick.
Exactly. Yes, something I think I come back to in another one of my rules later. But you're right. It is important to understand that it's there are people out there trying to manipulate us and control the narrative, and popularity is usually something to steer clear of.
Something that you've managed very well over the years, Rick.
I've put a lot of effort into it. I was worried that when I finally got married to my darling Keris, that might introduce me to a circle of friends and people who might sway me from the path and add to my social standing, something that I studiously try to avoid. But thankfully, even though we see each other at least once or twice a month, certainly most weeks, um, our relationship hasn't extended to the point where she's introduced me to anyone she actually knows.
How has Keris been, Rick? I know the two of you are still very much in love. I've seen some of the faxes
Yeah.
you send each other.
I think I'm having a deep effect on her. Frankly, she has started to independently look for the truth out there underneath the places it may be hidden. I note, for example, she seems to have come to the conclusion that her riding instructor may have something to hide because she's spending an awful lot of time with him and late into the evenings sometimes, which I see as a mark of true diligence.
She truly sounds like an astonishing woman, Rick. You're very fortunate to have
I am truthfully. I think
her.
she's she's an excellent woman, and I could not have been luckier.
Um, there's one way that you can be luckier, Rick, and that's we're joined this evening, of course, by our good friend Rico Zim.
Hmm.
Um, good evening, Rico. How are things in the old Winnebago?
Thanks, Dickie. Yeah, not too bad. It's not too bad. Well, I mean, we're the same as anyone else. How are we all doing? Struggling. I think with the certainly with the cost of living increase for those essential and often used tools for the well-established true snuffler: bread, pickles, golf shoes, tin foil. The price of tin foil. Don't get me started.
Yeah.
I've heard that many of those looking to protect themselves from the powers that be have taken to using the wrappings around the corks of wine bottles and stapling them together to create a metallic covering. Rico, surely you haven't had to go so deep into your finances yet.
Well, you know me, and I'm always one for planning for the future. So I decided to take the long term solution. I invested into a metal detector to find as many tin deposits as I can in when I'm out and about on the road.
That is a true thrifty truth foraging tip for those watching. So, have you been anywhere of interest recently, Rico? I know you are very much a wanderer, a traveller. Have you been anywhere interesting in the pursuit of truth recently?
Certainly not necessarily anywhere I'll be comfortable broadcasting as of yet, uh, albeit on a trusted and well established channel with presumably the usual measures in place. Dickie, Rick.
Very true. Thank you, Rico. You're absolutely right. Dear viewers, as you would know, all of you that have come along this evening will have been sent emails automatically when you entered the chat. Please check those now if you have not already. Um, and in it, as always, there is the latest certification to sign and to send back. You should be receiving through carrier pigeon over the next couple of days a small vial. We'd like you to fill it with 2 of your 4 humours and return it to us at your earliest possibility so we can get those checked and filed away. It's not for anything suspicious, as you would understand, but Rick, it's you'd be the first to say that to truly trust someone is to give them what they need in such a matter. Trust does not come without the need for testing.
Trust but verify, as several people have once said in the past. Obviously, you take people at face value when you first meet them, but it isn't long before some people will give away the fact that they cannot necessarily be completely relied upon. Um, People suddenly, it turns out, have a functioning internet connection in their own homes, even though we know that that can lead to all sorts of terrors. These things are a worry, and it does need to be watched for, I think.
Very, very much so. At this point, I'd like to make an announcement as we are among friends. Rick, Rico, um, we have been asked by friends in Faversham to speak live. It's not something we would normally do, um, but we had long discussions about it. Uh, Rick, we decided we would, which is quite something after the last time we spoke live at an event and caused near chaos and all the local shops ran out of foil and jammy dodgers. Um,
Yes,
hopefully the same won't happen again this time in Faversham, Rick.
I'm hoping not. I mean, for one thing, Faversham is a much larger community. The the crowd that turned out to see us last time may not have been huge in number. I think at peak there were, was it three at the height?
I think one was the barman, I believe, had to be there, but I think
Hmm.
he wanted to be there too.
I feel that's probably true, and yet we were able to cause something of a stampede, though I'm not sure if that's the correct term when it's one person. Anyway, there is certainly truth that that one person did go and strip the entire shop next door of all of its cooking foil. Something which turned out to be a bit of a local embarrassment in the papers since it was in the run up to Christmas. But the I think this time we're dealing with a far larger community, and there are far more shops to spread the cooking foil problems across.
Mm, Rico, it's your first time joining us for one of these live chats. Will you be coming yourself, or will you be sending your double that you send for such events generally?
As far as I'm aware, my as we are amongst friends, my double will be going in my stead. Of course, with the live feed to myself in the Winnebago, so that I can feed them the correct information and the relevant research that I've been doing. On a side note, I know that these live events are much needed. I think it provides rest, certainly for the programmers of the carrier pigeons. It's a much easier situation. People can just grab a container and fill up with whichever humans they wish on the day.
I look forward to receiving many humours on the day. It may be the only humour there is in the building. So,
Almost certainly true, because as I understand it, at the same time, one of the other rooms is hosting a stand-up comic.
the lowest form of comedy, as you often say, Rick.
I feel it's a limited role when you can't even bring a prop.
You've long been a fan of ventriloquism, Rick. Why is that? How does that tie into your foraging credentials?
I I must confess, I was not a huge fan of ventriloquism when I was a child, but then I started to realize that in some instances people were failing to understand how miraculous it was that the tiny puppet was able to work the giant human so flawlessly, and that did make me understand that there was so much more to investigate there. However, I have, despite repeated attempts, been unable to get any intelligible response from any of the puppets when they're off stage, which I don't know why they're so standoffish. I'm only here looking for the truth.
It is a wonderful allegory, if you will, though, for the truth snuffers out there trying to fight back against the bigger, wider system
Mm.
and have some control over it.
Yeah, and it is therefore quite a fascinating thing, I think. When you're exposed to these things and then you suddenly see what's behind them, as we discovered ourselves when we looked into snooker all those years ago.
Ah, don't remind me. I've not been able to watch a game since. It's one of my great loves from my youth is long gone for
Mm.
fear of mind control and brainwashing.
It is it is a fear that I think we all must face. Those of us who have particularly inquisitive and demanding intellects are particularly vulnerable, I suspect. We will see patterns that others might miss, and that could open us to such attacks.
Absolutely. At this point, I would like to quote one of our snufflers this evening, the Moore 76, who speaks as if many of us in the foraging community. It says, "In a world full of lies, you must let those ideas flow through you instead of fight it."
Hmm.
It's thoughtful indeed.
It
Rick,
is.
Rick, I'm sure that will find its way onto one of your pamphlets soon enough. Maybe with slight rewording so that you don't have to credit the gentleman or lady.
Um, I absolutely am
For their
opposed
safety, of course.
to plagiarism when it's done to me, but not as opposed when by me.
You are a great plagiarist, one of the very best.
Um, I I am, but I would prefer in mixed company if you were to refer to it as research, please.
You are definitely one of those as well, dear Rick. But speaking of research, we should delve into our first tale of the evening. Dear viewers, we have two tales for you tonight. The three of us between us have spent a lot of time researching. In some cases, we have researched on this channel for weeks, months, or even years. And tonight that is no exception. We like to keep things interactive for you, dear viewers, so there's a couple of ways that you can interact with us. Firstly, you can message, as some of you already are, if you so wish, in the chat, maybe with questions about our research, or maybe updates about your own research on the case. It's always fascinating to share knowledge that we have all learnt separately of each other to build a bigger picture, as it were, and to avoid one false narrative. Because, of course, as we know, the powers that be can force us down a certain route, even those of us that are carefully prepared to avoid such things. The second way is to click on the red sun, which the Boys and Baltic Star uses Imperial credits. They've allowed us this evening to change, as always, to I remain skeptical, or I believe. So at the end of each tale that we bring our research to, I will ask my dear friend Rick and my dear friend Rico if they truly believe in this tale or they remain skeptical. And depending on what they say, we will be able to flash up a graphic. I have that much power at least. And but you, dear viewers, may use your points to vote with I remain skeptical or I believe. And that hopefully will help us to understand where the community is looking. If at any time you'd like to hear more from one of Rick's pamphlets, we have offered Rick's tips as one of the options. We'll find a point where he can give a nugget of wisdom for you. Anything else on there is left by the Baltic Star, and we recommend you not using it at all. I believe the Sparrow approves releases a song by the Beastie Boys. And Rico, I know that you have strong feelings about the Beastie Boys and the use of their music.
Yes, of course. I know our friends over on the Baltic Star believe that the Beastie Boys are allegedly, in their opinion, very litigious. I, however, have a much darker opinion of their music, and in fact I think they want it to be used as widely as possible, particularly if you play it backwards whilst looking in a mirror at half speed. I'm not gonna delve any deeper, but do it for yourselves, listeners, and you'll see.
Is that playing the music at half speed or looking in the mirror at half speed?
The mirror, obviously.
Of course, it was a silly question. Well, let's move on to serious business for this evening. I'm very excited about this because first up, let me put the all-important music on. Let's go for dark music because it is a dark first tale. Good evening, Sparrow. Thank you for joining us, dear Snuffer, as we snuffle together. It's a pleasure to have you back. And you must be who that music is for. So it's good to know why it's there. The tale tonight is one that you, Rick, of course, a man who I can always trust generally, to bring interesting information into my life. I remember a few months ago where you woke me up with the facts actually at 10:45 in the morning, It was during my period where I was keeping to nighttime hours, of course, as I regularly do.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a fax that just said in big letters, "Have you heard of the unset alarm clock?" And I'll be honest, I had not. So please, Rick, what is it about the unset alarm that made you fax me so early in my day?
Um, well, you say early, um, not the point. I had encountered a, a strange tale that was recounted to me by one of those people that you sometimes meet as you travel through the world. In this case, a person who worked as a groundskeeper on an estate that I was carefully examining from all sides, following a lead that so far has come to nothing. But I feel there may be something there. Anyway, he told me this story, and the story was that he had an alarm clock. He'd purchased it in order to wake him up because, as a groundskeeper, he sometimes needed to be up really very early in the morning. There were occasions where he needed to be reliably woken at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And we naturally had a discussion about the fact that time is an artificial construct and therefore there is no reason ever to do that. And he laughed eventually. Um, I'm not entirely sure what it was that made him laugh, but something did. Um, anyway, the 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 groundskeeper himself, uh, who was in the process of trying to attach a gang mower to the back of a tractor, and I obviously assisted him with that by standing a short distance away and pointing at the bits he hadn't connected yet. He was explaining this tale, which was that he had purchased an alarm clock to wake him up, and no matter how he tried to configure it, it would not actually set. It wouldn't choose a different time or anything like that. It would just not wake him. And I found myself curious about this because naturally, your first assumption, he's just bought a new alarm clock and it never seems to reliably function. The first thought, obviously, is that it's possessed. Um, However, on this occasion, that didn't turn out to be the case. I was interested to discover it wasn't so much the clock as the house that the clock was in that was the interesting the interesting piece of the puzzle, and that's why I contacted you. That I'm tempted to say early lunch rather than morning, in order to bring you in on it. And well, perhaps since you came to it completely fresh, you would tell us what you found when you first visited his cottage.
Well, it was a fascinating tale. Anything that you bring to me like that um, will always hook me, Rick. 'Cause I know that you've always done very in-depth research, often uh, from a bush with binoculars, sometimes in empty rooms, sometimes in bathrooms. But this time was a house that was empty at the time that you were watching. The groundsman had left, and you sent me details, as you could see, of the rooms, how to get in and how to get around and such like. So I felt quite confident in entering said house. However, houses are not my forte. So I gave Rico a call, who joined me for my first foray into the groundskeeper's house. Of course, it wasn't a grand building, but when we got there, um, there was a strange sense, even before we went in, of a sense of foreboding, a sense of unwelcoming aura. I know you said that you said to me that the alarm clock, of course, was not possessed, and I believed it, but it didn't lessen the uncertainty in my head that there was not a greater power at play. Rico, you said to me that when we got there that you'd felt a similar sense before on one of your house visits.
Yes, yeah, of course, and it was exactly as you say. It was that uncertainty, almost as if you had set your alarm, and once the daylight savings has changed, and you wake up and it's slightly lighter, and you think, oh, what is the time? Has my alarm gone off? Did I oversleep? It's that constant sort of foreboding and uncertain sense. It was intriguing, certainly.
Yeah, I was sure that when we got to the house, Rico, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but that wasn't what your watch showed.
No. Exactly. My watch was still currently in the morning. It was about 9 o'clock, I believe.
Hmm. And we must have stayed there for an hour and a half, looking around inside and out. And when we left, your watch was still at 9 o'clock. Is that correct?
Well, yes, to the best of my knowledge, I know I certainly checked it as we exited, and it well, you saw the hands for yourself. You saw them what they did. It was remarkable, unremarkable.
Right.
I'm not
I,
sure.
I'm a man that never wears a watch myself, because the I don't like to be controlled by times. I believe that the government enforces times upon us, and I like not to be led by it, which was why I was so upset with the facts, of course, that morning. Um, Rick, however, you're a man who will wear a carefully vetted watch. Um, did you experience similar strange activity around the time when you scoped out the house for the first time?
I must confess that this is one of those things that you do encounter when you come across a credible witness and that witness tells you that there's something wrong with the alarm clock. This was one of the reasons I called you because I knew that I would be hopelessly compromised on entering the house. I immediately rushed to the alarm clock to see if it was possessed, and in doing so, may have inadvertently destroyed all sorts of potential clues that I might have missed on the way in, when the house is at its quietest and its most available for inspection. Um, no, it transpired quickly that I'd made a mistake, and I felt terrible about that, and I wasn't sure that I could recapture my own sense of complete open-mindedness, having already stumbled in such an amateurish way, frankly. Um, However, I regrouped and decided to send you a message saying, please come and investigate independently. And at the same time, I tried to rescue what I could from the property. Now, I mean, you will have also spotted the same obvious signs that I did. The wardrobe door opposite the bed, which clearly was a different temperature to the rest of the room. The strange depression in the carpet, um, which was right on the at the foot of the bed and didn't have any obvious cause, as if somebody or something had been placed there for a prolonged period of time, um, even though there was no sign of any such thing. Um, so I came to the obvious conclusion that there was some spirit living in that wardrobe, which every night, and probably all night, based on the condition of the carpet, was standing at the foot of the bed looking at the sleeping groundsman.
Hmm.
And that person, presumably in order to prolong this experience, was turning off the alarm that would wake him. Um, that was my natural conclusion, but I needed to be sure, so I had to leave the house and let eyes that didn't have my preconceptions come and take a look. But I would be very curious to discover if you concurred with my finding.
I, I think the most interesting thing for me was perhaps in the research that I managed to do on my trip down to meet Dickie at the location. And this isn't, as I spoke to the two of you, this isn't a recent occurrence at this address. In fact, it goes back many a year. In fact, I was able to find records of a previous tenant who employed the services of a knocker-upper, somebody who would go round and tap on the window to wake them up before the readily availability of alarm clocks, and they reported a similar circumstance where they would either not be woken or perhaps the knocker-upper never made it. Records being what records are, and this is quite difficult to come across in the first place. It's hard to pinpoint what indeed happened to the person who was supposed to raise them from their sleep. And I think we looked into that a little bit further when we arrived. Dickie, it's hard to pinpoint things that happened so long ago, but there are certainly signs. I think there were certainly signs around the bedroom.
It was very wise of Rick to call us, because he does get too close to such things. On at least 7 or 8 occasions, in fact, he has been absolutely certain that a timepiece that we've come across has been possessed. It is his default go-to. It's one of, I'm sure he wouldn't be upset for me to say, it is one of his weaknesses.
Oh, absolutely.
Possessed timepieces. I believe it's ever since he wrote a small book on such a matter in 1983. It's been hard to get out of his head, and so he did exactly the right thing. And to be fair to him, at this time, a possessed clock or something in the room would definitely have seemed the most likely. It's, for me, it goes without question that possession is always your first stop when there's anything slightly uncertain. Go possession first, and then go from there.
It's 9/10 of the truth foraging law.
It very much is. It very much is, and so it made sense that he did that. And I know, Rico, as we entered the house and we saw some papers slightly askew, an unwiped out footprint, which matched Rick's boots. We could forgive him for leaving in such a tizzy. But I think we were able to disprove a couple of his concerns while almost deepening one or two of his others, Rico. As always is the case with Rick, he always gets at least halfway there.
And that is his greatest strength, of course.
Very much so. His nickname used to be Mr. 52%. I was able to, of course, pretty much immediately cancel out one of his concerns, which was the wardrobe with the hotter door. I opened it, and inside there was a teas made on full bubbly brew. Obviously, it's set there for the mornings to help wake the groundskeeper, so he can have a hot drink before he starts. I don't know why it's in the wardrobe, but it was.
Interestingly, though, that worked.
You think it wouldn't, but once I'd opened the doors and saw how it was, it made total sense to me, I think. Less so the barbecue next to it. But we all have our quirks.
And of course, it's far too easy to fall back on the carbon monoxide poisoning being the root of all of this problem. We've heard it many a time before in many other sightings and unusual incidences, and I think we put that to sleep very quickly in the first instance.
I think so. And Rick, Rico contacted you minutes afterwards with the solution to the compression in the carpet at the foot of the bed, Rick.
Yes, yes, he did. That I suspect was a thing that only a true expert in the function and operation of houses could possibly
He
have
is an expert in
realized.
houses.
And I obviously I'm disappointed that I missed it, but equally, this is why we work as a team and why we check each other's work. Because it became extremely obvious, apparently, on careful viewing, that the small table that had been moved next to the bed in order to put the new alarm clock on it had, up until recently, been resting at the foot of the bed, and its floor plan exactly matched the depression in the carpet, which I had not spotted at all, not being as familiar with the way houses function. So I will say to Rico, thank you so much for pointing that one out, because frankly, I was convinced that there was a ghostly apparition standing at the foot of the bed every night, watching the groundskeeper sleep. And when I had explained that that was my finding, he did not take it well. So when I was able to go back to him and explain that it was in fact the impression left by the table that he'd moved, he well, in some ways he took that much better, and in other ways he became enraged. But it is I think good that we were able to set his mind at rest about that, at least. But of course, that did leave us with the problem of the alarm clock not possessed, not being artificially turned off by a spirit, at least not one that we could find. And yet, in this particular property, it seems there is a problem with people oversleeping, with them not being alerted by alarm clocks, with them not responding to knocker uppers. So I'm curious if Rico did find anything else in his researches into the house that might give us a clue to that.
Well, other than firstly, you're more than welcome, of course, Rick, for the observation. It's almost like, you know, the those people that have a perfect recall for images or information that they've seen. I have
Cameras.
this, yes, yeah, or birds, but I have this perfect the ability to see an object and almost exactly know its footprint in any given space. So it's come in handy many a time. But I'm glad it could be of assistance here.
It was tremendously helpful.
Good.
It was, to my mind, about an hour that we spent in the room, and we had discovered the teas made and barbecue in the cupboard. Rico had cleverly managed to figure out the footprint of the table to the compression. But as you say, Rick, that left us with the alarm clock. Now, luckily, I had taken my my smallest and daintiest toolkit with me, and we set to take it apart. But every time I used my small Phillips screwdriver, the screw seemed to be a flathead screw. But whenever I changed to the flathead, suddenly the screws were Phillips. It was as if the alarm clock itself did not want to be looked at in any way. Didn't want to share its spoils. Very
Yes,
peculiar.
indeed. it was yet another disappointment for me that having been distracted in one direction, I was then distracted in another and failed to spot something fairly significant that you found within. Well, you were barely at it for 11 hours, I think, before you found this out.
We spent a lot of time scoping the area, as it were. It's you must never rush in to such things, as you know. Um, my dilly dallying, though, of course, took time, and Rico, you took matters into your own hands very much at that time.
Yes, of course, and that led to I think what we can all agree is a very substantial discovery as well. Not to take credit, I think we'd all gotten us to this point, but in not on top of the willingness to yield to both the Phillips screwdriver, the posi and the negative, if you will. The alarm clock also didn't yield to the might of the claw hammer, which we found downstairs in the gardener's in the groundskeeper's, my apology, house, and seemed to withstand blows from all three of us at that point. With no reason whatsoever.
It's given that he'd purchased the clock inexpensively and from a manufacturer without a particularly good reputation. It seemed odd that we couldn't at least open it. The amount of effort we were using should have practically destroyed it, I would have thought.
I don't class myself as a strong man whatsoever, but certainly with the tool in hand, it felt as though we should be able to gain access to the juicy innards of said alarm clock.
So, I mean, as I suggested at the time, it was time to douse it in a solution. We use a number of different solutions for destroying or removing spirits from objects and properties as needed. The version you use does depend a little bit on the circumstance, but on this occasion we felt that a relatively simple one of a large trough of distilled water mixed with the urine of a pregnant goat would probably suffice. And after placing the alarm clock inside it, which again the groundskeeper seemed oddly resistant to, even though we were attempting to solve his problem. Well, I for one observed no spirit leaving or anything like that. However, on later reconnecting it and trying to get it going again, its symptoms had changed. Now, it wasn't that the alarm could not be correctly set and worked. It was now it seems not functional even as a clock.
Now, this for me opened up the next phase of our research into this. With the alarm clock broken, we and I hate to use that word, Rick, because I know you were looking to solve the case, as it were. But we managed to gather from the groundskeeper where he had bought the alarm, and I went over to the shop recently, actually, Rick. It's a little known shop. You may not have heard of it. It's called John Lewis.
Apparently, yes, I'm not wild about shops having anthropomorphic names.
No, it's especially names that have two first names is always a problem. And what I found, and I've not told you this, I was saving it for this evening to see what you would think with both of you with open minds and open eyes. That wouldn't be. I think sometimes we pore over things a bit too much. It turns out that this John Lewis has, in the last year, has sold many alarm clocks, thousands of alarm clocks. But I've chased up all the alarm clock sales, and 120 alarm clocks have been sold to groundskeepers and gardeners and such like those that work the land.
Mm-hmm.
120, and I phoned all of them, and it turns out that every single one of them has been late for work at least half of the days in the last year due to their alarm clock.
Now that is fascinating. I will confess I did not expect that. That speaks to a much broader conspiracy, and one that should be investigated. I mean, I am a little reluctant, obviously, to suggest that we necessarily wade in and investigate an investigation of that scale involving people like groundskeepers, because well, as I mentioned to you the other day, this particular client has been extremely reluctant to pay expenses to us for some reason. But if that trend is also widespread, it may be unsuitable to take on such a broad case. But I think we all know that there is something deeply fishy in the world of gardening.
If I'm totally honest, Rick, I'm more intrigued as to how the powers that be at John Lewis would benefit from such a large percentage of groundskeepers and gardeners being late for their work.
Hmm. I must say this is a truly fascinating development, and something that takes it far beyond the original investigation. I will have to go carefully back over all of my notes, all of the communications we received. I should do that anyway. I have to delete some extremely profane messages from a groundskeeper. But the truth is, I think we must go back to first principles. This is a vastly bigger conspiracy than we originally thought.
Which is often the case, but certainly not one that I expected on this occasion.
Given that it started on such a trivial note, an accidental conversation, assuming you're one of those people who believes conversations can never be accidental.
It's it was fascinating because John Lewis has, being the store it is, has a higher percentage of clientele who have gardeners and groundskeepers than many other shops in the UK. Um, so the question that really did puzzle me was why would they be looking to throw a hammer, um, you see, in in the works for that? As you say, Rick, it makes, on first sight at least, it makes no sense.
Mm. I I am never sure exactly how these things so frequently spiral out of control. You investigate something trivial like the squeak on a gate, or the fact that ducks are suddenly not returning to a local duck pond, and before you know it, there are aliens, government conspiracies, drone strikes, and it's just an unfathomable expansion of the story. Um, but I'm sure there is more to this than we have found, and it does worry me a little bit that as we're only touching the edges of it, we cannot begin to see what it might look like when it's all been exposed.
Um, Rico, if you check your diary, if you'd be so willing to, you may notice that I when I visited you just last week, I have actually filled in 30 different visits for you in the next 3 months to visit groundskeepers and gardeners
Mm.
around the whole of England, and um, I hope that your research will prove useful for myself and Rick.
thanks for scheduling those so concisely. For one, it's not a problem at all. And I particularly like the key that you've drawn in the notes section of the iconography of John Lewis and things to be on the lookout for when I'm at said meetings.
I hope that yeah, I hope they're fruitful. I would send Rick, but you're a busy man, Rick. It must be said.
I am. Not only do I have my own researches, many of which are best conducted at night in the dark without the landowner's permission, but also I'm dealing with an increasing problem with hate mail from a groundskeeper and various other things that make me loath to explore this particular one too deeply.
I think we can all agree that there's something at play here, but what we saw as an initial one-off potentially stretches far deeper than we thought. Um, and for one of the first times on the Truth Foragers, I feel that we must leave this tonight with an asterisk of an ongoing situation.
Mm.
So for tonight, for the first time, I think I may ask you the usual question, but in two steps, if that's okay. Um, let me play the special music first to get your information. Bear with me. Rick Bishop. Um, in the case of the alarm clock itself having some kind of supernatural powers, some kind of build build quality or spiritual quality, purposefully targeting groundskeepers. Do you believe or do you remain skeptical?
I am convinced there is absolutely no doubt. While I may not know the underlying reasons for it, I am absolutely sure. I believe.
And you, Rico's in the same question with regards to the alarm clock itself. Do you believe that there is a targeting, a supernatural power, or something like that?
I certainly do. I think the evidence, whilst edging towards perhaps that overwhelming side that I know Rick is keen to avoid, because of course all evidence of real conspiracies is well hidden.
Mm.
I think that perhaps the wider picture evidence is well hidden, as evidenced by the fact that this is the first asterisk to be continued investigation that has been featured. But I certainly believe that the alarm clock is not as it seems.
Fantastic. I remain skeptical with regards to the power of the alarm clock,
Mm.
but I would very much like to see more research. I saw with my own eyes the changing screws, but at the same time, by the time I went to the house that evening, I was quite drunk,
Yes.
as I often am by that time of the evening, of course. Um, Now, the second case in this is the role of John Lewis. Now, Rick, you're a man who is skeptical at the best of times about big business and such like. But in this case, I know that your aunt used to be a big fan of shopping at John Lewis. So, does that flavour your view in any way?
I am forced to go back to first principles. Yes, shops that attempt to anthropomorphize themselves by giving themselves human sounding names is obviously a worry. Gigantic corporations are obviously a worry. But I cannot shake the fact that John Lewis, it advertises on television. It has famed annual events for sales. Not that I would ever go to such a thing, you understand, but it does not feel like the activities of a conspiring entity. If John Lewis were a company that operated from a cellar deep in the suburbs, in the sort of back streets of Bolton in Greater Manchester, I would believe it to be a conspiratorial entity. Or if even if it were hiding in plain sight, like giant transmitter masts or government ministers. But there's something about the active advertising that drives me away from it as being a conspiracy. I would see it more as a cover for one than an actual conspiracy itself. And as a cover, of course, it could be unwitting.
So that's a scepticism from Rick Bishop to the larger picture. But you, Rick, goes in with the case of John Lewis actually having a focus on targeting the nation's gardeners and groundskeepers. How do you feel at this point?
Uh, I find myself caught in two minds, which is very rarely the case for me. Um, I of course remain sceptical of larger corporations. Certainly ones that only sell tinfoil in the form of those cardboard baking trays covered in tinfoil that you use to display cakes at, quite frankly, ludicrous prices. But then the fact that they sell them at all, I would have expected anybody knees deep in a conspiracy to remove all tin products from their catalogue. But I have to say, it's at this moment in time, I do believe that there is a wider, more overarching conspiracy involving. I won't mention it quite so close to the other words that I've used,
Of
because
course.
as safe as the channel is, there's always a level of precaution that you need to take.
Very wise as always, Rico. We are, of course, keeping your connection extra secure. So hopefully, no members of John Lewis can find where you are. Of course, very litigious, I've heard.
Yes, certainly, definitely. It helps that I'm currently also doing well within the speed limit, but at least 60 down some narrow country lanes. So makes pinpointing my location, apart from the two of you, obviously, all the more difficult.
A wise precaution and I must say, an important safety tip.
Yes, yes, of course.
Looking to the chat with regards to the clock itself, there's belief in the clock, which warms my heart in the groundswell towards old school truth hunting. I think it's the bread and butter, as Rick would often say.
Feet on the ground.
Oh, it's what we grew up with. It's what we live for. With regards to the larger conspiracy, there's a mix, which I totally get. I am going to make a note of Ewan 1985's address. I need to run that to check that he is indeed who he says he is. But it's for the good of our friendships as a group, of course. Fantastic. Well, there is one more this evening. One more to look at. Are we both okay to go straight on, or do you need a couple of minutes?
I will leave it up to Rico. I can go either way.
I'm more than happy to go straight on. I think at this point, if I break, I might need to reprogram my sat nav and adjust some things in the Winnebago. So let's go.
Fantastic. And this is something quite exciting for Rick and myself, because we often like to look at a local angle here on the Truth Foragers, and this one again is from Faversham, which is where our live show will be in a couple of weeks' time. It's a fascinating tale, Rick. One that I wasn't expecting you to come to me with, but you were quite insistent.
Well, truthfully, it's not necessarily your area of expertise or even your area of interest. And I'm sensitive that you do this sort of work very much as a labour of love, and it's important that it be a a subject matter that you can take some excitement in. Um, however, I obviously don't want to give away too much, but the the center of this story is, well, extremely close to where I currently live, um, within a matter of, let's say, a short distance. I certainly wouldn't want to give away more than that.
Mm.
It's it is within a arguably frighteningly short distance. In fact, um, the the story came to my attention purely because of a simple announcement. Um, I was concerned by an announcement that I heard while I was visiting a railway station, the railway station in Faversham, in fact. Um, and what they indicated was that there had been, and I quote, a failure of the signal box, though they didn't specify which signal box at the time, which had led to some delays in the trains for the day. Now, obviously, I wasn't planning to get on a train that day. I was investigating other things, but it did occur to me that a failure of the signal box might be an interesting matter. From where I was standing, I could in fact see the signal box, and well, clearly it hadn't failed. It was right there. It was fully intact. It was still standing. It hadn't collapsed into the ground, disappeared, become invisible, exploded, caught fire, fallen apart, repelled itself, floated in the air, turned upside down, become orange, or any of the other things that we naturally would assume would be indicative of such a failure. Um, so I naturally got in contact with you and said, um, "Are you aware of this failure?" Especially since it was pretty obvious to me that the message that was at the railway station was recorded. This was something that happens from time to time. Um, and yet, I was not aware of signal boxes appearing lime green or inside out or made out of marshmallow or moon rock or being struck by meteors or any of the other things that naturally we would look at and go, that is clearly a failure of the signal box.
You I remember you contacting me. It was I was still in bed at the time. It was 2:30 in the afternoon, I believe. Very
That's
very
about right.
very
Yes.
very early for me, and I brushed my teeth. I gathered my things, and I came to join you. Um, it's possible to make your way through somewhat to the signal box, of course. Even truth foragers like us would suggest caution around train tracks at very deadly places, as we've all been told. It's one of the rare advertisements on TV as a youth that actually has truth to it, Rick.
Absolutely. They are famously haunted.
Exactly so. If you slow the adverts down, in fact,
Mm.
some of the death on the tracks ones, you can see ghosts in the background,
Mm.
although it may be the quality of video from the 80s.
Um, I I am convinced that the quality of video from the 80s is in fact revealing more than it conceals.
It's true. And we used to have a lot of old recordings of old adverts, Rick, years ago, of such public safety adverts looking for patterns, but a lot of those have been recorded over in recent years, Rick. We have far fewer of them now.
Yes, I suppose I should put my hand up to that. The reality is that the old VHS tapes are getting harder to find, and they are the most reliable way of storing that kind of information because they are the technology that was contemporaneous at the time. And I needed those tapes for my collection of Darcy Bustle video. So naturally, they fell by the wayside.
27 of them, in fact.
Oh, I haven't shown you the new batch.
No, this, you're still sticking to VHS.
Yes, yes, of course.
Wonderful, wonderful. I like the way that when you pause VHS, the juddering truly shows you what's happening in the situation and not what they want you to see.
Exactly. It's practically impossible to fake such a thing. Also, a lot of the videos I'm watching these days are, after all, of a dancer. The juddering back and forth between the frame adds a sense of movement.
You're such a poetic soul, Rick.
I have heard that about myself.
Hmm, a beautiful thing. So anyway, I came to your house, an incredibly rare treat, it must be said. Um, it was nice to see the postcard that Keris had left you.
Yes, it wasn't that nice of her.
Very, 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 very nice. In fact, I like her thrifty soul that she sent it without a stamp and that you had to you paid for it.
Yes, and also the fact that the message, we know each other so well now that it is possible for her to convey a truly astonishing amount of information in just those two words.
And the fact that she used the same pet name for you as the groundskeeper did is uncanny.
Isn't that an amazing coincidence?
It's amazing. Uh, but we sat and we chatted at yours until it got darker, because one must not just wander around by places such as signal boxes during the day. Um, at that time, Rick, you called Rico, who was able to connect through webcam, of course, which we connected to your jacket, Rick. Rico, how was the picture at the time? Was it of a good enough standard?
Oh, it certainly wasn't anything as it certainly wasn't comparable to how many now is it? Were we up to the 50 tapes of Darcy Bustle?
Wait.
Somewhere
Rico's
in
seen
that
the new
region.
batch.
Well, I mean, not all of them, obviously.
No, of course. But it was certainly functionable for the purposes of that evening's activities.
Rico, as everyone knows, you are an expert in houses, but are you an expert in other buildings, or how did you feel with the thought of a signal box? Did you feel as comfortable as you would with a groundskeeper's house or a stately home or a two up, two down?
I felt quite reasonably comfortable. It must be said, signal boxes are, in many instances, an extension of the house. Certainly, historically speaking, the oddly enough, my ability to footprint items does not work over webcam. So that was not available to us at this time. But I am familiar with signal boxes. Certainly, I think the thing on this occasion that stood out to me, going back through the history of signal boxes, and certainly what we found on the evening, is Rule 55, of course, which you're both familiar with. But for the viewers and those that aren't, Rule 55 is an old railway rule where in past times the Rule 55 required that the fireman of any train that was detained for a prolonged period of time at a signal box would need to walk down to the signal box and assist the signalman with some duties. Make sure that the level was capped off so it can be accidentally pulled, and of course sign the book in the signal box, the records book on behalf of the train, which we we're with friends here, aren't we? But of course, on that evening's investigations, we did come across the old record book.
And old record book is correct. For when we got to the signal box to find it locked, lights off, we found discarded in front of it the book. And when we opened it, we found that there had been no new dates entries in it since 1996.
Yeah.
Which was quite shocking for me, Rick.
It is remarkable. In fact, of course, at this point, the turn of the investigation fell more into my hitting zone.
Absolutely.
Evaluating
You
old
looked
records.
quite excited at that point.
Show me
I
some
was bending
ancient
over.
handwritten
You nearly had my eye out.
Yes, it is something that does drive me. The examination of old records, books, diaries, notes. I have found many fascinating things in them, and I find that old records are invariably very reliable. The further back you go, the more reliable they become. But in this case, the a quick flick through the record book did indicate a number of previous instances in which uh, Rule 55 had been enacted. You could always tell because when the fireman came along to sign the book, there was always a little smudge of coal dust and bacon grease next to it, as you would naturally expect. Um, yes, the book ran out in 1996 and had what I thought was a very cryptic message in its very last entry, or technically not in its last entry, but immediately underneath, um, which uh, I didn't entirely understand because it stepped into areas that I'm less familiar with. But it did say, um, welcome the automated world, which I thought this is some parallel universe with which I am sadly unfamiliar. So I asked around to my colleagues, of course, did they know what this could possibly presage? And it turns out this is one of the reasons that it is good to be around younger people who have different life experiences, because I think both of you were able to at least explain some possible explanation for that.
It was quite surprising in some ways to me. I thought that the book might have been kept up for longer than 1996. That a lot of electrical stuff, as we know, came in after the year 2000. That strange things happened on those nights around that turn of the millennium.
They did.
Things changed there, but 1996, it was a strange time for it. The last entry of that was indeed the night where England beat the Netherlands in the Euros 4-1, if I remember correctly. I know you're not a sporting man yourself, Rick, but still, it's a night of note. It's what was more concerning was, as you say, was the welcome the automated world. It felt quite dystopian and something that you wouldn't expect in a lazy, sleepy town of Faversham.
Absolutely not. And obviously, when confronted with something like that, that is so out of character with the rest of the book, which frankly had dates, times, train numbers, bacon grease,
Bacon grease, yep.
you do think there is a a possibility that such a sudden change in style means something dramatic has happened. And a careful examination around the signal box revealed that there was at least one possible candidate. Um, because we found, well, frankly, some droppings of vermin,
Mm,
which brought me to the possible conclusion that in 1996, possibly while the staff were distracted by a football match, which you did helpfully provide context for,
absolutely.
a good moment for such a thing to happen. Maybe the signal box and its ongoing operations was taken over by some uh, large and possibly supernatural rodents.
Rico, you're an expert in rodents,
Mm.
and you immediately you helped us out greatly with this theory.
Yeah, of course. Well, as you're both well aware of, being that additional outside pair of eyes, I've long believed that in fact rodent people do run rampant in the town of Faversham,
Hmm.
without meaning to cause any offence, of course, to the two of you, certainly, who I know are 100% actual people and not rodents in suits. Um, but there were certainly signs. There was certainly quite clumps of thick, coarse hair, specifically rodent hair. Definitely not hair of a human nature, abandoned in piles in the corner. Almost forming somewhat of a large. I would hastily say nest, but it wouldn't be outside of the realms of possibility. This was the formings of a nest. Um, and of course the droppings.
Hmm.
I am on sort of you discussing more about the rodents. I'd I looked up about the Faversham signal box um, that evening when we got back to yours, Rick. If you remember, um, while you were in your bedroom, uh, I don't know. You took the postcard up with you, and you were making a loud noise in your bedroom. I couldn't tell if it was. You said why a lot. I know that, so I wanted to leave you to whatever you were doing, and I was looking at the Faversham signal box, and try as I might, I could not find a single human name as the signal master after '96, which tied in somewhat with Rico's thoughts on such a case and your thoughts that maybe there was not a human hand at play after this Netherlands game. When you returned, Rick, I told you that you you seemed interested in my findings.
I think not only were they a beguiling thought and concept, but also I suddenly found myself in need of something to focus on, a project of some sort,
Mm.
and this seemed conveniently located geographically, something we could easily throw ourselves into with great gusto. And there was the possibility that it would end in a life and death struggle with an army of angry rodents bearing horrific diseases on their insanely sharp teeth, which,
It's something you'd always
right at
been
that
interested
exact
in.
moment, sounded pretty good.
Mm. Um, that would explain why you demanded that we head back straight away with crowbars.
Exactly. Yes. Crowbars and with raw meat draped around us.
It must be pointed out though for any viewers watching that I did of course take the precaution just to double check both Dickie and Rick, and the fact that they were not indeed rodents. The easiest way to do so, if you find yourself in such a situation, rodents are almost entirely have a set of continuously growing incisors on both jaws. Calipers to your friend's teeth at regular intervals, just to make sure that their teeth aren't growing faster than you would expect. Is a good measure of finding yourself in the company of two wonderful human beings such as Dickie and Rick.
I was, of course, off the hook as my incisors are only continuously growing on my bottom jaw.
Yes.
Yes, and mine only on the left.
It adds to your charm, Rick. It adds to your smile.
I would say it adds to both of your charms, and definitely to a measure of your human nature.
Undoubtedly, yes. And back we went, and it was. I mean, I felt it was quite exciting. The strips of bacon dangling from our necks, a crowbar in our hands. We charged back and clambered over a fence. And I'm not as young as I used to be. That took an hour, but we eventually did arrive back at the signal box, and I was relatively in good physical form because, it had largely fallen to you two to lift and carry me over the fence. So you seemed more worn out than I was. But by the time we got to the door, which was frankly not I think sufficiently proofed against rodents, it did not look like a sturdy enough door to deal with a rodent attack to me. It was a mere hardened steel with a fairly modern padlock on it. I was expecting some rather more impressive deterrent effect, possibly vicious poison spikes or something.
It's you're always a man who thinks security first, and I appreciate that about you, Rick. I think we were very fortunate that Rico had managed to get his Winnebago down to Faversham in those hours to join us, and I think with his knowledge of rats and your bacon earrings, Rick, I think I felt very confident that we could smash this mystery of what indeed had been running the signals at Faversham for nearly 30 years.
Don't sell yourself short, of course, Dickie. Your expert knowledge of traps and ability to reinforce said door with a spring-loaded. I'm not even sure where you found all the parts from, but that bar proved very reassuring.
Yes, and it was an excellent trap and very painful. I can still actually feel it sometimes.
The mark it left was impressive.
It was impressive, yeah.
Thank you. I'm a craftsman. It took a while to get into the signal box. I was quite excited that about what had been basically running the trains for the last 28 years. Faversham is a station, for those that don't know, that takes trains from London. It's very vital. It divides trains to different parts of the coast, some to Dover to the ports there, and some up to Ramsgate to the ports there. It's quite a vital station along the way for such a small town, and to have signals working well is incredibly important in a country where, for half the year, the government make up lies about leaves slowing trains down.
Yes. Yes.
So to know what was running it was incredibly important. Rico, sorry, have I?
No, not at all.
Overexcited you?
I was merely going to point out the fact that that being on such a train line to famous port towns is perhaps the in point for the rodent population to Faversham. Ship's rats being a long and historical, well-known. I think we can say fact at this point. I don't think that's been
I agree.
as of yet.
Yes. Yes, and ports are obviously important to rats in particular. I, I,
It's in the name.
I'm not suggesting they're unimportant to other rodents, but I think rats do have a history with ports.
Mm.
Very much so, and I think so. All of this, I think, the rats, the hair that have been seen, the uncertainty of post Netherlands England 1996 Euros game, the connections to the ports. Um, I was very excited to crack open this door, Rick, and you were the first man in.
I was, and immediately the clues just fell towards me. It was abundantly obvious we were on the right track. At first glance, of course, there was only one rodent that was immediately visible. Um, it was not of the continuously growing in sizes variety. It was of the wire attached to a personal computer on a desktop variety. But um, the the other clues, there was a Panini sticker album from the 1996 Euros,
Mm.
just uh, casually thrown onto a desk, artificially casually, as if nobody could possibly have spotted its significance. I think sometimes when people assume we are incapable of seeing such things, it's almost insulting, isn't it?
It's
Mm.
I'll be honest. It's you're absolutely right in that. The for me the kind of the what really nailed it for me that something was not quite right in that was that next to the sticker book there was a load of the swaps, the swap stickers. That when people collect such sticker books, they'd have whole piles of doubles and triples that they would try and trade away. Um, yeah, it was very weird that of all the 30 swaps they had, all of them were of the Bulgarian player Hristo Stoichkov. Every single one.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
set alarm bells ringing for me.
I mean, naturally, um, those who are not familiar with sport may not know his name, but in truth foraging circles, of course, Stoichkov is a significant name. In addition to spending his spare time playing sports, he was a devoted and avid snuffler for the truth truffle, wasn't he?
I used to enjoy going to meetings with him long ago when we all used to do it in person.
He was a lot more he was a lot less jaded, should I say then? Though, if I'm honest,
Mm.
very much in it for the joy of the snuffling.
It, I mean, it was a glorious time.
Hmm.
He could do important and potentially world changing work, and then unwind at the weekend by kicking a ball about. I think he had the balance perfect. His hobby of football was barely a distraction from his work.
For me, it was a sign that there was something more at play. It was a definite statement that those that know how to snuffle the truth truffles would understand immediately, clear as day.
Hmm.
It's like flashing a light in someone's face.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
It's just a shame that it had to end in such a way.
we all run that risk, frankly. Those of us who go searching for the truth occasionally may stumble across it, and sometimes the consequences are, well, enough to stop you from ever going out again for one reason or another.
it was sad. So we knew that the sticks themselves could not have been from Stoichkov himself, although it's been a long time since we've heard from him for those reasons.
Hmm.
But it felt like maybe another snuffler had been in before to leave a bread trail for us.
Mm.
Maybe a sense of warmth in our stomach that things would be okay after all, as someone was on this.
As you know, because I told you at the time, that was not my first thought.
It rarely is. You said possession of the Panini sticker album was your first thought.
That was my first thought. But my second thought, well, third technically, I reserve a few seconds every minute to think about Darcy Bustle. But what I was considering was the sheer number of Stoichkov stickers implied that perhaps the rodents had been collecting them as a useful guide for what to watch out for in someone they would have considered strongly an enemy, as if each
Hmm.
rodent would carry one so that they could compare the picture in the sticker to anyone they saw, anyone who might have been following them or taking an interest in their activities. And suddenly I was very grateful for the fact that I did not appear on the Panini sticker album list for the 1996 Euros.
Hmm.
Uh, you were very clear, I remember, in '96 that you would not pose for any photos.
Uh, I definitely felt that way at the time, but I mean, more specifically, I didn't want to pose for any photos for things that would be so widely published and distributed. I was prepared to appear in the background of a picture taken for the local press, for example, but that was part of an experiment. I wanted to see if the camera would in fact record my face correctly. Um, a, a, Another investigation had led me to believe that cameras were capable of recording people's faces in ways that they would not normally appear, and that these pictures were turning up in the local press. So I rather followed a couple of local press photographers around and leapt into the back of various pictures they were taking, most of which they did not then publish for some reason. But
I remember you looking at one. What you showed me it together. You said it was a picture of you in the background. You said that for whatever reason it came out horrific and deformed, and yet to me it looked just like you. So clearly there was some strange ink making it look different for different people.
I think that is the reason. I felt very strongly that the picture, um, well, certainly it didn't represent what I see when I peer into my mirror. Um, and clearly, I don't trust government approved mirrors because you can't trust those.
Oh, of course you can't.
So I have to make my own. Um, and and that way you know that you're getting true fidelity from them.
A lot of polishing of those metals.
There is a certain amount of polishing, yes. Though I have discovered that my early experiments simply floating a layer of mercury onto a tray may have led to insanity in some people who did that. So I'm glad I only tried it for 30 years.
I can imagine that very much leads to a true vision of what you're looking into.
Yes, I believe it does, and can potentially allow you to see things that mere photography will not reveal.
Hmm.
It's like having your portrait painted by a truly skilled artist, someone who can capture your real essence and your real being.
Mm.
Um, it's it's just hard to find an artist clearly who can do so with also accuracy and fidelity in the image.
Hmm. And of course, Dickie, your reason for not being featured, um, not so much the issue with photography, but more the issue with paninis.
Hmm.
I, I, I have a big issue with paninis. Um, I was for those that follow local news, I was wrongly pilloried and made fun of for my repeated letters to the newspaper of outrage when paninis started becoming a popular sandwich of choice in town. I stated that no good would come of it, that it would bring the wrong sort of people into town, those that don't truly believe, those that look to hide conspiracy and fear. And I was proven right ultimately, but I never got an apology for it.
No.
But because of that, it hurt me a lot, and uh, I would not appear in any Panina sticker albums after that.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
If I recall correctly, Rico, your objection to it was the fact that you have a lifelong aversion to postage stamps, and you felt that these stickers were fundamentally disturbingly similar to postage stamps, having a headshot and a sticky rear side.
Yes, indeed. And whilst the rear side of a sticker for a Panini, sorry, Dickie, to keep bringing up the word, sticker does not require licking. I think we're all familiar with the what the government puts on the back of stamps for people to lick.
Absolutely.
I'm surprised people haven't uh, risen up about that. To be honest, one of the most obvious for me over
And
the
the
last.
symptoms are horrible.
I'm just
Truly,
glad that
truly.
letters are going out of fashion. I know, Rick,
Mm.
you still like a letter, but you handcraft the stamps yourself to look incredibly similar.
I find that it's safer and makes it much harder for you to be tracked. I mean, obviously, I also don't trust the postal service or any
No.
courier companies. So after I've handcrafted a stamp, I then hand deliver it myself to the destination. But I feel that's the most reasonable way to avoid any external scrutiny.
It also covers any issues you may have with postal workers scrutinising your crayon stamps.
That hadn't occurred to me actually, but you're right. I wouldn't want to give away my secrets to just any passing postal worker.
Quite right. Ultimately, speaking passing, it was a passing railway worker that brought an end to our investigation that night.
It was. I mean, in the first instance, he brought an end to our investigation because he noticed our investigation and he didn't approve of it.
Mm.
Um, and that's a fair point. But also, as we left, um, well, technically, as you two left, and as I hit the trap that you'd so cunningly placed, it was, as I say, an excellent
Mm.
trap.
Oh,
Um, he did shout something at us, which, well, at this point, I should mention that the nature of the impact from the trap had disoriented me a little. So perhaps, perhaps, Dickie, you would remind us exactly what he shouted.
he shouted, "We still believe. We still believe."
It is a notable chant, especially in reference to the year 1996, and led us to the obvious and inevitable conclusion. Though we were not lucky enough to actually stumble across what we were hoping to find, a huge, dangerous, violent group of diseased, terrifying rodents in the middle of the night when we were covered in bacon. That was obviously the hope. Um, we nonetheless, I feel, found plenty of evidence to suggest that this was a rodent conspiracy. Um, but I still harbor a few doubts, not over the rodent conspiracy, uh, not that exactly, but exactly why these rodents are so comparatively incompetent at maintaining the proper operation of a signal box.
It is mostly automated these days.
You would think that they could do it quite comfortably. I mean, They have the wherewithal to mastermind a huge global conspiracy, and yet, I don't know, something doesn't add up there for me.
Put a piece of cheese at the end of the maze, and they can navigate their way through with expertise. Very much as a train navigates its way through signals to its intended destination.
You would think, in fact, that this form of training was almost specifically designed to teach them to operate train signal boxes.
And yet, maybe we will never know. For when we went back recently, the fences were higher, the bolts on the signal box were heavier, the windows were shuttered, and there was no scratching or remains on the outside whatsoever. I know that we fear that our chance to truly get to the bottom of this is gone forever. So I must ask you now, Rick Bishop, as we pause for the sound effect. In the case of the Faversham signal box, with all the evidence there, the Stoichkov stickers, the Panini sticker album, the rat hair, the no human input since 1996, have rats been in charge of the Faversham signals since the 20th century?
I so want to say that I believe, but I think we may not have the full story quite yet. And maybe it doesn't fall to us to solve this one. Maybe it will be someone else who will finally furnish proof. I cannot say I believe, I'm afraid. I do remain a little skeptical until more evidence can be gathered.
A wise approach, Rick, to not dive in two-footed in such things. There's so much more we can look into here. Rico Zim, best at rodents, expert in houses. This was your wheelhouse, your hitting zone. Where do you stand?
It certainly was. The thing that struck me was when we returned, and although we couldn't gain access, there was a large increase in bacon grease on the outside. Although that might have been us fleeing with bacon struck around our necks. But it is certainly within my wheelhouse, a home for rodents, if you will. And whilst the evidence is strong, I will say that I do believe, though at this point in our investigation, it is mostly a gut feeling, knowing rodents as I do, having spent so much time with them. It just felt right.
I appreciate your belief in these matters. For me, although there was so much proof there, the Stoichkov stickers, the chant of the worker, there's just still something that I don't need to see something with my eyes to believe it. I don't. I think that is folly to have to rely on that, as Rick has written in many pamphlets. You don't have to believe your eyes for something to be true. But for me, I just need something more. I don't know, maybe more rumours, more whispers, more howls at night that can't be explained. So for now, I'm afraid until I get those things, I must remain sceptical.
I do see your point. I would feel more comfortable if there was some collection of ancient notes, scrawled diaries, old documents, ancient local news stories in some forgotten cellar covered in dust. Until then, we'll have to console ourselves with some bacon, fish finger, and peanut butter sandwiches.
You know, a way to a man's heart.
I would certainly agree with that. Either more or as Rick has often said, less information would make it more believable.
Exactly.
More or less, one of the two, but not quite this
This
specific
amount is not the right amount. I do feel that in my gut. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Like that bacon, fish finger, and peanut butter sandwich.
and to be honest, chat agrees. There's skeptics in there, and I find it hard to go against what they say. I think there needs to be more looking into it, but I don't know if we're the men to do it. I just hope that someone takes that beacon from Stoichkov, better men than us,
Hmm.
and runs with it. Maybe Shearer. I
Maybe.
heard he
Um,
was looking into such things a while back before he went quiet on it.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think we've all had our hopes over Alan Shearer, but it hasn't quite panned out yet.
maybe this will be the one to bring Stoichkov back into the game.
He has been sorely missed.
I would be
We should send a pigeon.
thrilled. I'm sure you've got one of his
Reach
old
out.
addresses, Rick. It'll get there.
Mm.
It'll get there. Right. But until that time, I suppose we must finish for this evening with I would say with hopeful thoughts for the
Yes.
future, something that we can cling on to. And so we will go into our evening for you two. Pretty much my morning, it must be said. But thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Sparrow. Thank you, anyone else that's still around. We appreciate you, our trusted friends. Please keep snuffling for truth truffles together with us. Report any of your findings for future episodes. But until next time, sleep soundly. You know the precautions to take. We will see you soon. Good night, one and all.
Good night, and thank you.
Good night.